You're listening to the Sex and Psychology Podcast, the sex ed you never got in school and won't get anywhere else. I am your host, Dr. Justin Lehmiller. I am a social psychologist and research fellow at the Kinsey Institute and author of the book, Tell Me What You Want, The Science of Sexual Desire and How It Can Help You Improve Your Sex Life. Historically, the word chastity has referred to suppression and control of sexual desire. That's probably why you've heard terms like chastity belt or vow of chastity before. In the modern world, however, chastity has taken on a whole new meaning. For many people, it's not about repressing sexuality. It's about exploring desire, anticipation, control, intimacy, and pleasure in new ways. People engage in chastity play for a wide range of reasons. For some, it's a form of kink. For others, however, it's a way of deepening connection with a partner, exploring power dynamics, or even redirecting focus and energy toward other goals. And perhaps most surprisingly, many people find that restricting access to pleasure actually intensifies desire rather than diminishes it. In this episode, we're going to explore the psychology behind chastity play, including why people are drawn to it, who's into it, and what chastity can teach us about human sexuality more broadly. My guest is Paul Botto, the COO of Kink 3D. He's been working in the queer and kink community in San Francisco for the past 10 years, joining Kink 3D in 2021 as the company's first hire. In addition to overseeing areas of the business ranging from supply chain to customer service and fulfillment, he spearheaded Kink 3D's live events program and has traveled widely across the US and Europe, offering the company's unique chastity cage sizing service. This is going to be another fascinating conversation that you won't want to miss. Stick around and we're going to jump in right after the break. If you're looking to gain a broad understanding of human sexuality or refresh your knowledge, check out the next Human Sexuality Intensive at the Kinsey Institute. Participants will explore foundational concepts and recent developments across a range of topics related to human sexuality through an interdisciplinary, evidence-based lens. Topics will include sex, gender and sexuality, identity and intersectionality, sexual behavior and consent, dating and relationships, and more. This course is open to both emerging and established professionals looking to specialize their knowledge, as well as those seeking new career directions. Previous participants have come from all over the world, and those who successfully complete the program will receive a course certificate from the Kinsey Institute. The next intensives will be in May and June of this year. To learn more, visit kinseyinstitute.org or check the link in the show notes. Okay, Paul, let's talk about some of the different ways that people incorporate chastity practices into their intimate lives. So, something that may surprise some listeners about chastity is the varied forms that it can take and the meaning that it can have in people's lives. So, let's talk about some of the different practices that are out there. And we'll start with solo chastity. Now, I think a lot of people would probably assume that chastity only happens in the context of a partner controlling access to sex or orgasm, maybe because that's only what they've seen in the world of pornography, right? Because most chastity play that you're going to see in the world of porn is going to take the form of being in some type of relational context. But clearly, that's not the only way that chastity can work or can happen in real life. So what are some of the common reasons that people might choose to engage in chastity entirely on their own? And what do they get out of that experience?
Yeah, so I think some people use chastity as a way to kind of help focus their energies in their life in directions that they find more fulfilling or positive or productive. We hear from people, often younger people, they love porn, they love masturbation, they want to do other things, they can't get out of this like dopamine cycle if they want it, and they feel bad, and they kind of constantly engage with themselves. And so they want to go to the gym, they want to get fit, they want to get in shape. They use chastity, a device, to help control that. And sometimes it's just that. Sometimes it's just a way to take something off the table so you can do something else, but also as a reward. Maybe you're like, hey, I'm going to block up once I get, hit the gym 7 times this week, or I make some accomplishment, I can unlock and enjoy myself. It's not necessarily just taking it off the table. It's also a way to kind of find things that reinforce the patterns you like and then redirect that energy toward things that you do. Solo activities with chastity can also involve just kind of gender affirming things, where if you're a trans or non-binary person, you may find that you don't feel comfortable in your body. And maybe you're looking for ways to find, a bit more home in yourself. And so having control over your body and putting on a device can really kind of affirm what you feel about yourself inside. And I think that's a really positive psychological way for them to find meaning and to move forward and feel better about themselves. And then we kind of start moving into the more sexual ways that people solo play. I think this is common for people who want to explore other parts of their body. And, for many people, that's using toys and experimenting in ways, whether it's something new and they want to have that energy focus there. They have all this pent up sexuality or sexual tension that they want to find other outlets for. So they start exploring, or people who already know that they like other things and they lock up so that that's off the table, and they can actually have extended play sessions and enjoy themselves longer without kind of being tempted to just go ahead and play with themselves, maybe get off. The scene's going to end and they're kind of disappointed. So I think people really can use chastity to help heighten other ways that they engage with themselves sexually.
As you were speaking there, I was thinking about something we were discussing in the previous episode where we were talking about things that people can learn from the chastity community. And one of them that just now struck me was that, all right, so if you're using a cage or, some other device that is going to prevent the penis from becoming erect, but you're still exploring and engaging with your sexuality, that makes me wonder about how maybe that can be a mechanism or avenue for learning how to enjoy and explore yourself sexually without having a hard penis, right? Because for so many men, they don't know what to do sexually if the penis isn't hard, right? Because the dominant sexual script is sort of the penis has to be hard in order for you to engage sexually. And if you're not erect, then there's nothing that you can do. And then that leads men to feel shame and anxiety and insecurity and all these other things. And so I think, that's actually an interesting angle here with chastity, is that maybe it can create more erotic versatility and help you recognize that you can still be a sexual being and enjoy yourself and experience pleasure and give your partner pleasure without having an erect penis.
Yeah, I think that actually has two aspects. I'll cover one at a time. And you're right. So a lot of people, maybe people who haven't explored their bodies much, don't know how much pleasure there is to be had. Anal play for anyone can be quite fun. I mean, it's maybe not something that is familiar, but it can become familiar. And there's a lot of sensation and a lot of nerves and ways to actually get a lot of pleasure from that area. And if you've never really needed to explore it or wanted to explore it or been desired to explore it, you may not know. And so I think a lot of people find that there's a lot of fun there, and that they probably wouldn't have explored it at all or as much if they didn't have some other kind of motivation to do that.
Mm-hmm.
But something else you mentioned there that I think occurred to me that I'm aware of that I think is maybe helpful for people is some men feel insecure about the size of their penis. And of course, that doesn't matter. You can enjoy life and sex and partners regardless of how big or thick or whatever you are. But I do know some guys like locking up because it makes them feel better about that. Whether it's because it's taking it off the table or it makes it look kind of sexy because it has this device on it, or they feel good. I think for some guys, it really is liberating because you're getting outside of that mindset of I'm not adequate enough for someone. Just wearing it by itself. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think those are really interesting angles that most people have probably never really thought about when it comes to chastity, right? Where it can help to take you out of your head and help you to be in the moment, because the sexual experience is not so focused on how big your penis is or whether it's hard and whether it stays hard the whole time. And so I think for a lot of guys, that might actually help with a lot of the performance anxiety issues that they might have that often get in the way of sexual function and sexual pleasure. So there can be lots of different appeals of, why people are drawn to chastity. And I think, as you were describing some of these different motivations, on the one hand, there's that sort of erotic tension and the possibility of prolonging sexual excitement, but also for other people, maybe redirecting their energy toward other goals or priorities in life. But these things aren't mutually exclusive, right? So is it the case that people might start using chastity for one reason and then discover entirely different benefits or motivations along the way?
Oh, definitely. I think this comes from anyone who uses it. Will often find there's aspects that they were not expecting and that are often oh, this is great. And I am so glad that this came about because I probably wouldn't have stumbled on it. And this is anything from, I find that I have more free time. I find new interests. I find myself doing things that I wasn't doing before, or that it's I go hiking now, or I picked up a hobby and it's oh, this is amazing. I'm really glad I got out of that mindset where I was focused in the wrong way and get distracted. And now I'm actually feeling positive. I think even with solo play, when people start exploring their bodies more, they start finding other ways that they feel good about themselves and that they had never experienced before. Like ways of letting go and letting themselves enjoy the pleasure, letting themselves actually be present in their bodies and feel good and not just want that quick fix, want that orgasm, kind of that one modality that people will get in. They actually find that there's a lot more to themselves that they really like and that they realize they haven't been getting, that hasn't been like, part of their life, whether themselves or others. And so that opens up a lot of doors and lets them know more about what could be. I think there are some other aspects that like we hear about a lot, and I think it's amazing, but it makes sense now that I know about it. But like, especially for couples, and then we hear about a lot of it from heterosexual couples where once the husband, the partner, the man is wearing a device, he becomes much more attentive to his partner in very positive ways. And it's gratifying for both parties. They really feel like there's a better connection, whether it's doing more things around the house or their sex life improves because the focus is shifted. And while that may have been part of like the fun of it, I don't think people expect it to extend outside the bedroom. I think they expect this to be a kink you do for 2 hours and it's done, but the relationship shifts. And this also happens just day to day when, a couple is wearing a device, someone's holding a keys, and there's often just a lot more communication. There's a lot more thinking of the other. There's a lot more awareness of the other. And I think that's also a really gratifying thing where relationships become automatic and you kind of get into like, lulls and you don't quite keep that positive, engaged focus with each other.
Yeah. And I think everything you were saying there is really interesting because I think a lot of people only associate chastity with BDSM and kink and something that maybe you only use in the bedroom. But as you were describing, it can also transcend your intimate activities and might have spillover effects into your broader life. And, couples can use this for a lot of different reasons. And it's not necessarily always even just in a couple context. If you think about something like cuckolding, I've written extensively and researched cuckolding dynamics, and a lot of people incorporate elements of chastity into that, where if you have, for example, a heterosexual man who's watching his female partner have sex with another man, sometimes he might be using a cage as a way of, sort of heightening the excitement of that situation because it's further contributing to that dominant submissive dynamic that he might be enjoying about that. And so there are lots of ways that chastity can kind of intersect with other sexual interests and kinks where it can sort of amplify the excitement factor there. So I think chastity is this, sort of versatile tool that people might employ in their intimate lives in very different ways. And it's not going to look the same in one relationship context to the next.
That's one thing that a part of my job, which I get to travel the country and world where I admit events and kink things, leather events, where I meet a lot of people. I get to introduce people to chastity and help demystify and educate. And that's one thing that I really like doing is trying to help people see that it's not only a thing that's just by itself, that it only has one kind of purpose about this like locking up and being locked up, that it can be incorporated into a lot of other dynamics, kinky and not. A lot of different kink has aspects of control, submission, trust, and I think chastity kind of synergistically can go along with that. Like people who like bondage and like being tied up or like tying others up. This is a type of bondage. People who like play that's not traditional, penis penetrative sex find that, locking up can be a really good way to kind of incorporate that. Even the more kind of mainstream, normal day to day, we just a couple. We just like it. It just kind of means meaningful to us. It helps with our connection. It's not kinky. It's just one aspect of our sexual relationship that is gratifying.
And, something else that I also find interesting about the role that chastity can play is how it intersects with hookup culture, right? So, for example, using a cage isn't just about arousal. It can also be a way of communicating your preferences, your intentions, or your boundaries. And so I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about how chastity can sometimes function as a form of sexual communication in and of itself.
Yeah. So a not uncommon thing I'll hear from when guys that I'm meeting is that they like wearing a cage because they're endowed. They have a very large what most people love, like big, beautiful penis, and people want to play with it. He's like, and they're like, I want to receive too. I want to bottom, or I want to be the recipient of attention. I don't always want to be in that role. And so by wearing this device, it both symbolizes, hey, this is not what I'm looking for, but also tangibly takes it off the table. And so it can, on that way, show what you're looking for in that moment. As well as sometimes if it's more like day-to-day common, you can say, this is the kind of person that I am. I'm on the submissive side, or this is the kind of role I want, whether it's I want to receive a certain type of play, or I want to engage with you in a different kind of focus on you sort of way. It can really flag, in a sense, like what you're looking for.
Yeah, and I think that also gets at another big misconception about chastity, which is that a lot of people would necessarily associate it with people who are taking on submissive or bottom roles in sexual relationships. But in fact, many tops or dominant partners might want to lock up or, otherwise be engaged with chastity themselves for various reasons, right? Because you gave a few examples previously, but it might also be a way of enhancing their own desire or their focus or their engagement with a partner. So, chastity is something that may be a versatile tool, and that different people who might have very different sexual roles might be drawn to it for different reasons.
Yes. One of my favorite things that I get to do when I meet people and we start talking is someone will be like, well, I'm a top. I'm never going to lock up. That's not for me. And I'm like, really? And so I start talking with them and I'm like, so I've literally had people tell me that they don't take their ED meds anymore. They don't take Viagra. Instead, they lock up for like a week. They don't maybe keep it on all the time. They lock up during the day or in the evenings. And that alone helps build up their energy and their interest. And by the time that they're actually going to engage with someone, they're ready to go. And they don't need other support to kind of engage the way they want. And so for them, that's just a very natural way to kind of like have that heightened arousal. Other people maybe use it for like, I'm going to see someone I haven't seen in a while. And I want that energy there when I see them. Even if I don't need support, I really am going to enjoy it. And so it's something that's going to really bring more excitement to the table and everyone's going to have fun.
Yeah. And it's something where, we were talking about chastity is a form of sexual communication, but it also can have this deeply symbolic meaning to people as well. Some might use it as a sign of their trust or commitment or devotion to one another, and I think you mentioned this in the previous episode. It's that for some people, wearing a chastity device might function more like a wedding ring than it does a sex toy. So can you talk a little bit more about that sort of symbolic dimension of chastity and why it resonates with so many people?
Yeah. So this touches on, I think, a common area that's often not talked about as much or people don't think about because it's a little bit out of the view, is that there's often a key holder, which is the term for someone who is like the dom and maybe a dom sub or a locked relationship. And so the person locking up often has a key and they'll give it to someone else. And that exchange of the key in and of itself can be meaningful. For some people, it's fun. It's just about sex. Other people, it's like a level of trust and commitment that you're going to trust someone to hold this for you, to take control, to give you permission to unlock or when you can enjoy yourself. And so that by itself is really, I think, an important thing that often gets overlooked. And I think the key holder is an important part of this. They're getting pleasure out of it. They're getting an emotional connection. They're getting this feeling of someone trusting them and having that part of the relationship, which is really important for both sides. You can't have just a sub without a dom, right? It wouldn't quite be the same. And so I think both sides can really find the connection that comes with chastity and the symbolisms that can come with things like key holding and wearing someone's device and I put my cage on you and then you wear it and I have your key. So there's a lot of things that I think become meaningful for both sides.
So let's talk about the practical side of chastity for a little bit. So chastity devices are physical devices that people might wear for extended periods of time. So there are obviously going to be some practical considerations that come along with that. I know as somebody who is deeply immersed in this world, I wondered if you could tell us about some of the most important safety guidelines or best practices people should keep in mind when exploring chastity.
Yes, this is actually something I feel very much like I always want to talk about. On the internet, you might often see a lot of information. You see people talking about it, engaging with it. Some of it's smart, some of it's healthy, some of it's not. So, as a starting point, like all kink, all sex, be responsible, be smart, go slow, educate yourself before you jump into the deep end of anything. When you're starting just wearing a device, find one that fits well. People often think that there's like a special size or a beginner size and a professional size. And we're very much of the philosophy that everyone has a cage that's going to fit them, much like shoes. And shoes that are too big or too small are not going to work great. So you want one that's going to fit well, comfortably. And your body knows, people don't realize it, but you put one on that's the wrong size and you're going to very much know it's not right. Practically, there's obviously some major things you want to be careful of. Constriction, this is a very important part of the body. So blood flow, nerves, very important to protect. So discoloration, especially blue, purple, that's bad. Tingling, numbness, bad. Take everything off. Not a smart move there. And go slow. People often want to jump in, get a device, they like it, they're going to stay locked up for a month. And we're like, maybe take it for a day. Maybe take it for a few days, kind of get used to it, learn about what your body needs, how you're going to function with it. Throughout the day, you're going to find things come and go, bodies move, activities are important to kind of like learn how to engage with. So taking it slow, paying attention to your body, really smart ways to start out when you're by yourself. And I think the other thing that I really think is important that is something that I think the kink community in particular can really help bring to the larger community is the communication that's really important between people when they're engaging with like a key holder locked person dynamic. Being very open up front, being clear about what you want, what you're open to, what you're going to need, both sides, understanding the attention, focus, energy that's going to come from this dynamic. Because I think going in with that is going to make it enjoyable and gratifying in ways that if you don't, you might both end up disappointed or even hurt.
Yeah, I think that's all great advice, not just for chastity, but for exploring any type of fantasy or desire that you might have, which is to start slow and, take your time, because you don't have to explore everything right away, but also to have that really excellent communication about what your intentions and boundaries are so that everybody's on the same page about how that experience is going to go. Now, for someone who finds this conversation intriguing and is interested in exploring chastity with a partner, I wondered if you had any advice on, how do you just even get that conversation started, right? How do you introduce a topic like this in a way that feels open and collaborative instead of intimidating?
Yeah, so I think the first step is always to kind of spend some time with yourself thinking about, well, what am I interested in about it? Like, what am I drawn to? What do I think I would be open to trying? Because I think understanding yourself is really going to help start that conversation. And you may not know right away. Maybe you start with it's something that I'm curious about. I'm curious about playing with gender dynamics, power dynamics, trust. But kind of identifying the starting point, I think, if nothing else, is going to really help when you have that conversation. And I think, some people, when they're approached, especially if they're not in kink or they're not as aware of the world, it might seem off-putting. They might kind of have that reaction of like, oh, medieval metal belts that are for control. I don't understand why you would want that. But I think approaching it from sharing what you're excited about or curious about or what emotionally this might be for you, and acknowledging that it doesn't have to be any particular way. Like, you can start slow, you can explore together. This can have something meaningful maybe outside of the norm. So it doesn't have to be any one thing, and be ready for questions and maybe kind of doing some exploration together about what it could be for y'all.
Yeah, I think that's great advice. And the only thing I would add to it would be, when you're talking about a new interest that you have that you want to try with a partner, yes, talk about what it is that draws you to it and why you think it's exciting. But also, if you can mention what you think your partner would get out of it as well, I think that also helps to make it more validating for them and also more just sort of inviting overall. So if you can talk about, here's the different ways that I think that this could help to benefit our sex life together. And maybe, for example, it helps us to build up more anticipation so that the sex that we have is even more excited and connected than it would otherwise be, right? Anything that you can do to sort of add that component to it, I think is usually helpful in sexual communication. But for listeners who might be curious about exploring chastity and have never done it before, how do you know whether it's right for you, right? So is the answer to just go out and buy a cage and lock yourself up and see how it goes? Or are there any sort of approachable ways of just sort of dipping your toes in the water and figuring out whether chastity might be something that is right for you?
Yeah, I mean, the reality is you don't need a device to engage in chastity. Devices are tools that can be helpful and playful and fun, but you can start out with, okay, well, we're going to commit to neither one is going to masturbate. We're not going to have sex. We're not going to look at porn. We're going to take a few days and just do that and then see how it goes and see how that frustration, that energy, that excitement might build. And so you can just kind of practice a little bit like that. And if you're finding that, oh yeah, the longer we wait and the more I think about it, the more that I'm like excited when it's like Saturday and we get to go and have our date night, like that might be a good sign that this is something that you want to take to the next level. There are often rather inexpensive ways, kind of like not meaningfully locking up, but kind of like playful ways that you could try it out that are inexpensive, maybe during a scene or for a day, just to kind of dip your toe in without committing to like a full device or an expensive one, because good ones aren't cheap. And you can say, hey, this was fun. This is something that I enjoyed a bit. So maybe I do want to try this more. Maybe we both want to see what else we could do with it.
Yeah, so you don't have to go out and buy a device right away because there are lots of different ways of exploring these chastity dynamics. And you can do it in ways that I think, a lot of people might not necessarily associate with chastity, but it's really more about just sort of redirecting your erotic energy and attention toward one another. And, whether you formally call that chastity or not, it's building anticipation, building connection, and I think can actually be a very helpful dynamic for a lot of people who are looking to get the spark back in their relationship or to really amp up the level of sexual excitement that they have in their relationship. So thank you so much for this amazing conversation, Paul. It was a pleasure to have you here. Can you please tell my listeners where they can go to learn more about you and your work?
Yes, I work for Kink 3D. Our website is kink3d.com. We have some great information on there. We have some general information about chastity, as well as a blog where we try to do our best to educate, bring some insight into the community. We have community authors that come in and talk about their experience. I'd also recommend Reddit. There's a lot of actually positive Reddits out there, subreddits out there that have a great community where people talk and share and learn, and they can learn from each other. And so it's a very supportive place, especially things like chastity training. So I think that's another really awesome opportunity to learn more.
Great. Well, I'll be sure to include links to all of that in the show notes. Thank you again so much for your time. I really appreciate having you here.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening. To keep up with new episodes of this podcast, visit my website, Sex and Psychology, at sexandpsychology.com, or subscribe on your favorite platform, where I hope you'll take a moment to rate and review the show. If you listen on Apple Podcasts, please consider becoming a Sex and Psychology Premium subscriber to enjoy ad-free listening for just $3.99 a month. You can also follow me on social media for daily sex research updates. I'm on Blue Sky and X at Justin Lehmiller and Instagram at Justin J. Lehmiller. Also, be sure to check out my book, Tell Me What You Want. Thanks again for listening. Until next time.